And so we've got Izzy and Maria and Kristen and myself. Um, and as you can probably tell by the last names, we're a little bit related. Kristen is just a little. Kristen is my wonderful daughter. And, well, why don't you start by telling a little bit about your background prior to joining Full Sail?
Well, I started off with a degree in sociology from the University of Central Florida. And at that time, I was also working full-time at Full Sail in the financial aid department. And thanks to that and knowing my dad, I was able to speak with a lot of different professors in the different departments. And I figured out pretty quickly that a sociology degree as a bachelor's is not really going to get you very far. You really, with that degree, you have to continue going on for a PhD so that you can actually either teach with it or get a decent paying job. And I realized I didn't want to do that. And with talking to a bunch of different professors in different topic areas at Full Sail, I realized that the digital marketing area of expertise would probably be best with my background. Because with sociology, I learned to see trends and patterns among the large groups of people and trying to understand why people do what they do in groups really does help with marketing. So I started looking more into marketing based on that.
Actually, I was just going to say from an undergrad degree, there's a couple of good basic degrees that you can build on, and whether it's a business and a marketing focus, like you're starting with, Izzy, or it's psychology or sociology. Sociology, the study of how groups interact. I mean, what a great foundation for jumping into marketing, which is trying to influence groups. So, go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to capitalize on that.
No worries, and I just want to apologize now because I am a bit tired. It's been a very long day, and I'm a little disheveled, so I might be a little out of it with how I speak and how I connect things. So sorry, guys. But once I realized that I wanted to at least try out digital marketing, I decided to look up some basic courses online, just some intro to marketing classes, really. I don't quite remember where I went to, but I just did some intro to marketing classes online and realized that I really did enjoy the trying to influence people aspect of marketing and the fact that you kind of get to be like a detective with figuring out why a certain marketing campaign worked versus another one didn't. And that really did appeal to me, so I decided to jump feet first and go for a master's degree without even trying to go for a bachelor's in marketing, which made things a little more difficult starting off with that way. But since I did since there were so many online resources for just marketing blogs, marketing how-tos, it made it a little easier to start off doing that and jumping into the master's degree.
Cool. So we're actually coming up on your anniversary of your graduation, aren't we?
Yes. I would not suggest graduating in December, though. They do not announce valedictorians.
So as you went through, so you got started. Now you had some very limited marketing experience too, but it wasn't digital. It was.
I did some market research back in 2008 with my first job, and it was just basically looking at competitors for the company I was working for, which was a screen door company, and they were trying to branch out into other areas, potentially something to do with hurricane shutters or bug spraying. And not just simplistic bug spraying, but I believe it was a system, bug spray system, where it would kind of like a
it was mass genocide for bugs on an outdoor living area. Is what it was.
There we go. Yeah, it's been quite a few years since I've had to think about that, but it was just basically doing research, which at that time also really, that was when I was just starting my undergraduate degree, so that was a good intro for sociology too. So even though it was market research, it was still getting into finding good sources for research and papers. So that was my first foray into marketing without really realizing it at the time.
So as you went through the program, what courses did you really enjoy? And I can ask this because I wasn't teaching the masters at that point in time. But when you got into like the different areas of marketing, were there certain courses like SEO or PR, just because it's there? But were there certain areas like that you found more interesting personally?
Well, I really enjoyed the law course, which was right towards the end of the course. I think at the time it was the 10th month in, maybe. But it was just because it was a really complicated subject area where there was no real right or wrong answer with it. You just had to present a case and fight for it the best you can and understand all the different laws that could affect you online, because it's a huge landscape and they're changing pretty much daily, and some of them aren't as enforceable as others, like the Can of Spam Act, which, while people love to bring up that you shouldn't be spamming people with emails, it still happens relentlessly. There's no real policing of that, which is a shame because no one likes their inbox filled with spam, but it's really hard to stop that one. But I also really enjoyed the analytics class because I didn't feel like it covered analytics well enough, but it was also, I struggled with it a lot. It was not something that came to me easily because I don't have the strongest background in math. Even though I've taken calculus courses, I did not do well in them. And I really enjoyed being challenged because it was not a way I'm used to thinking. I can spot trends and generalize things, but to actually try to use numbers to then formulate why something happened was a new experience.
Cool. So how did you prepare yourself then to go out and start to use your degree?
For the last 6 months of my program, I decided to take on an internship. And at the time, I was working full-time still at Full Sail, and I had to make a very choice whether or not I was going to quit or not quit and risk having no real background in marketing, trying to get a marketing job, which I realized that was not the smartest choice for me because I had no background. My work history had nothing to do with marketing. You couldn't even stretch it to do with marketing. I worked data entry. I was an assistant where I did do a little bit of market research, but that was so long ago. It wouldn't weight much at this point. And then financial aid. None of that background related whatsoever to marketing, and I had no real confidence at that point in time that I'd be able to take on any freelance work because since it was such a new subject area and I did not have a background and I didn't get a bachelor's degree relating to marketing, I felt a little bit disadvantaged based on my own choices to choose to jump right into a master's. So I decided to risk not working full-time and go for a internship that was unpaid. But with the internship I chose that I was accepted for, I had a lot of freedom with it. It was a marketing assistant role. And the nonprofit I ended up working with had very little digital presence. They had a social media account, but it wasn't really used. They didn't really have any followers. And they had no tracking of their online website. and most of their outreach was through donors and going out in person to get donors to help their not their charity. It was a volunteer endeavor called Volunteers for Community Impact. They worked with seniors and putting seniors into community service endeavors, and for some of them, it was also they were able to get a government stipend for working as a volunteer.
Cool.
And
So,
for a lot of those seniors, that was their only pay.
so you got to work in a number of different areas?
Yes. For the 6 months that I worked with Volunteers for Community Impact, I helped handle their social media account. So I was designing and creating all of their social posts that to not just raise awareness of who they were as a brand and what they did, what their impact was, but also to gain more donors so that they, since there's always a lot of concern over how much grants and funding you will get from the government. Having a nice source of private income and private donations really helps in times where when the government decides to choose a different charity to go with their funds. So I was also tasked for trying to find new avenues for them to get money, just new ways to bring it in, because I didn't really ever handle anything directly since I was an intern. But what we ended up doing was taking part, because it was in the later half of the year, I got to take part in Giving Tuesday and help create a marketing plan and then implement it for Giving Tuesday to try and get donations for them. And that year was the first time they tried to get online donations, and they got several donations at the time through Giving Tuesday. And it was we also initiated an online mobile donation setup through the Google charities. I don't quite remember what that one is called, but there's an app that Google puts forward that allows charities they'll choose a random charity to feature a day, and there's other charities you can find to donate to.
Cool. Okay, so from that point, you finished out your master's, and then became the challenge of finding a job in the field.
And that was very difficult. My resume, I felt, was not really polished enough. And it took several attempts at remaking it. And then I also ended up creating an online portfolio, which was a little counterintuitive for me, because most of what I didn't really think would translate well online, because a lot of what I did was written. But I was able to put the social media campaign that I did, the online donations that I did, and I put all the successes that I accomplished while working with the nonprofit up there, and listed them out. And I was able to graphically display and just put a lot of really nice graphics on there that just gave my online resume a new life, and it helped me stand out a little better, because once I stuck that on my resume, that link to that website, I started getting a bunch more callbacks and a lot more phone interviews, because it gave me a little extra over everyone else.
Maria just asked how long your internship was. Was it 6 months?
It was 6 months.
6 months. Okay. So the online portfolio, is that also where you had your resume?
Yes, it was the first page. The intro to my online portfolio was pretty much my resume, and then there was links out to the different projects that I did while at the nonprofit. I also put on my final project from the internet master's degree.
Excellent. So, and the other thing I heard you say was that you were as you were working, you were refining your resume.
Yes, it took several different attempts, and the resume I started out with was about 3 pages long, which was, for my lack of experience in marketing, way too long. And by the end of it, it was a very nice and neat one-page resume that had a list of my skills that created the bulk of my resume right at top. And then it went into my education history and then job history.
Have you kept your portfolio up online?
Apparently I have. I just found it the other night, and I realized it still has my phone number on there. So that's something I need to go and edit. And it's also now, since I have not looked at it since I got hired after my full sail degree, it's a bit outdated now. And since it is still searchable and you can still find it, I really do. That is something that does need to be kept updated as long as it's live online.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. Very true. So, how long was it from when you graduated to when you started to do interviews and get some serious offers?
I started to do interviews probably the middle of January, but I did not get hired until about April. It took me about a month and a half to get my resume to a point where I felt it was good. And I had spoken with HR professionals they were the ones who really had a good hand in updating my resume with me. And it was their idea to do the online portfolio, because I would never have thought of that on my own. And oddly enough, I did not work that much with full sales career development. I tried, but their schedule and my schedule just never matched up. I was able, since I was a Universal employee for Halloween Horror Nights, I was able to meet with their HR department because I was trying to get a marketing job with them, and they helped me update my resume. And they have some really good people there. They have HR representatives who spend hours of their day on HR forums debating the finer points of resumes. I did not know that kind of forum existed, but in case you guys need help with resumes, there are forums. You just have to find them. And they do have some really good. They do have really good ideas on there.
Cool. Maybe we'll have to brainstorm and we can create a list and make it available. That's a very good idea. So your first job was with
Bonnier Corporation. They're a publishing company that's originally based in Winter Park, but they were bought out by a larger company who is based in Sweden. But they publish magazines like Popular Science, Destination Weddings, Islands. Field and Stream is a really popular one, and it's been featured in a couple of shows. Saveur is a recipe one that was in the Avengers, or not Captain America, the Civil War movie. They had a scene with a image of Saveur's recipe on there, so they were pretty well known, more so than I thought at the time when I got hired by them. But they hired me to do digital analytics with Adobe Analytics as their tracking software, which is a program that I never before touched, never saw. In the master's program, you only really get to look at Google Analytics and SpyFu and a couple of other, not necessarily website tracking software, but
tools.
Mostly tools that we can get for free were what I got to see with Full Sail. But working with Adobe Analytics is a much, much different experience than Google Analytics. I would definitely recommend some Adobe experience. Even if you can't necessarily get in the program, if you can find someone who can show you how it's set up, because it's so customized. If you start figuring out where things are located, it looks really good on your resume. It's such a hard thing for employers to find people with Adobe experience, and you see a lot of the bigger companies with it. Like Universal uses Adobe, Disney uses Adobe, Time Magazine uses Adobe. A lot of the big publishers use Adobe. They also use Google Analytics, but they run both. And having experience with both is super beneficial, and it really helps you stand out. There's a lot of online tutorial videos. There are some on lynda.com that show you Adobe. Some of it is outdated because Adobe does update on a quarterly basis, and they did a major overhaul of their appearance about a year and a half ago. But if you just start to get a feel for how they lay things out, once you get in Adobe Analytics, it's kind of intuitive where things are, because they try to make it as pretty easy and customizable. Setting it up on the back end, though, is very complicated, and that you need coding experience and expertise with, and that I do not have yet.
So, but I've heard you say you've done some coding. Was that with Google?
No, that was actually back in middle school. I created a few websites.
No. I'm not talking middle school. Go ahead. We'll talk about your middle school coding.
Well, no, that's really the only coding experience I've had. I've looked at coding, and I can QA some basic, very, very basic Adobe Analytics tracking code, but that I haven't actually built it out myself.
Okay. I was thinking that I heard you say something about writing some tracking code, and I thought it was while you were at Bonaire, but I may have been mistaken.
I do create tracking codes, but that's not coding.
Yeah.
It's creating a query parameter for your URL. So
Right.
It's much, much simpler.
Yeah. Actually, Kristen is being very humble about her coding back in middle school. Her website won either a national or international award. I forget now, but
Just national.
Just national. So she did big time things all the way back in middle school. So did you? Izzy has a question.
You don't need to know coding to use Adobe Analytics. It's just some companies it helps you stand out if you're able to place Adobe Analytics coding. However, Adobe Analytics has a tool called Dynamic Tag Management, and that creates the coding in the back end. So normally, all you would need to learn is the DTM, and while it's a little difficult and confusing to start to learn, and I can't really describe how to learn it because I haven't yet. I haven't really worked with a client who uses it. My first company that used Adobe Analytics had their own tagging systems that our developers created, and those were the ones who did the coding. You just may want to get familiar with looking at the coding and maybe seeing if something looks. You don't even need to know what's wrong. If you can notice if something looks off with how things are loading on a web page, it's beneficial, and it just helps makes you stand out. And it makes your job just slightly easier if you notice something in the tracking website. The website traffic looks off, like numbers jump up 400 times what they normally are. There's probably something misfiring, and it helps to be able to find the page that's happening on.
Cool. So now you used both at Bonaire, Google and Adobe, or just Adobe?
I did use both, but Google was not used as often, and it was used more on the outdated magazines. Like, it wasn't used on any of our main magazines, and everything that used Google was being switched over into Adobe.
Got it.
Because with the volume of traffic that they were getting on most of their websites, it just made sense to be in Adobe because they don't sample. And Google will sample their data if you reach a certain threshold of traffic.
So you're no longer in Florida. You've moved to Knoxville, and
Yes.
you changed jobs.
Yes, almost a year now.
Wow. So what do you think led to the new job?
Well, keeping my LinkedIn profile up to date, definitely, because I was not looking for a job, and I didn't even have any signifiers on my LinkedIn saying I'm looking for a job. Other than having my LinkedIn updated what really stood out to the headhunter who contacted me was the fact that I had listed that I had Adobe Analytics experience. And that was something that they had a client in Knoxville who desperately needed it. And they needed someone to do Adobe tracking immediately. Guinness, yeah. But it really is, Adobe Analytics is something if I can't say enough, I would suggest trying to get some sort of exposure to, because I'm still getting contacted by headhunters every couple of months to look at other jobs, because they just need people who can look at Adobe, and there's just not enough of us.
Cool. That's a gap in the marketplace then.
It is a big gap. I've been contacted for Nashville, Memphis, a couple of positions in Orlando, and I believe I got a call from New York that I just did not respond to because it's New York, and that's even colder than Tennessee. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it makes a difference to know software programs that maybe not everyone else has access to.
Well, the other thing I was going to ask you was to contrast the experience between working for an agency and Bonaire. You were kind of an agency within the marketing department, right?
Yes.
What's
I was in a very unique spot there.
And what's the difference like?
Definitely the workload and the expectation. Although at Bonaire I handled sometimes 30 to 40 different brands, just depending on the amount of magazines, websites, and digital publishing platforms that they were using. I'm currently only in charge of 5 brands now, but the expectation of the performance output is much greater. I have to do quarterly business reviews for 5 brands at the same time, and they span up to 90 slides sometimes per brand. So and there's no real leniency and trying to delay when I present. And I have to work with not only myself and other people in my department to get some of this data. I'm working with our paid search team, our display and media buyers, and our paid social teams, because they all need to be able to put in some input and make sure what I'm presenting actually makes sense to them and makes sense in the whole picture, because sometimes analytics can get really bogged down in the numbers and may not catch or understand some of the smaller details or some of the planning, some of the tiering, like maybe not every store gets the same coverage, and that's going to affect how the insights go, because maybe the conversion rate suffered a little because, let's say, California stores got maybe 10% of the budget because their in-store performance is strong enough to warrant such a little budget, while a store in Idaho might need bigger budget because they need more help because it's not as populated.
So, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that now not only are you accumulating the data, but you're having to work with other partners in order to be able to interpret the data?
Correct. I provide initial insights, but then I have to go to the other team members so they can add additional color or detail that I may not know or may not be able to see in the data. And then we also create recommendations together. Sometimes I'll start it off based on if I see certain campaigns performing better or certain audience segments performing better, I might try to recommend putting more budget towards an audience that is looking at music lovers over the audience that may be just rum lovers. And just for a little bit of context, I work with restaurants, and they do events with music sometimes, and they have bars. So us trying to reach out to rum lovers and music lovers does make sense in that setting.
Good deal. But it really does sound like your interaction with the client, the client decision makers, is at a much higher level now that you're at the agency.
Yes, before I would occasionally give presentations, and I would just pretty much show the data or send it off in an email showing that the page views for the website were up year over year or month over month, and it's due to increased social pressure or an increase in paid sources. I didn't really have any handle on any of the decision making at all. I didn't have any sort of effect on it. They were trying to change that when I left because there were a couple magazines that were not making any decisions based on data. So they were having some issues with traffic that they were declining year over year and were propping themselves up based on just with paid traffic solely. And if they had, so towards the end of my tenure at Bonnier, they were shifting so that we were not only just providing the data points and slight insights, they were trying to provide actual deep insights and relate it to recommendations and hopefully help bring brands to a better place with traffic so that they weren't relying so much on paid.
Cool. So besides Adobe Analytics, what other tools do you work with?
I've currently started working with Tableau. It's a data integration partner that can take in data sources from Facebook, AdWords, DoubleClick Manager. There is a vendor called Cito who does mobile proximity tracking. When that's if I serve you an ad on your phone and you then take the phone to our restaurant, we know you've gone into the restaurant after seeing our ad, and we can track that. It's a little stalkery, but we have a software that will pull in data from them so that we can blend it all with what we see in Adobe Analytics, because we can also create a data line from Adobe Analytics to Tableau and blend it in with all these other data sources, as well as any sales data, so we can start seeing what direct impact our campaigns are having on sales, in-store traffic, and how even our display advertising could be influencing more search traffic organically.
So a good part of what you do also then is trying to figure out ways to determine attribution.
Yes. We are working on an attribution model for the clients I have. Other clients with other analysts already have versions of attribution models because they've had their dashboards set up and running for quite some time. This one is, we just went live with the dashboard, we still are missing some of the data lines, so we don't have one into the sales data yet. So we're not quite able to attribute our campaign efforts directly to any sales increases. We've been trying to do it ad hoc with our clients looking at their sales information at the same time that we're running a campaign. And we get it sometimes, but it's not consistent enough to accurately say whether or not our campaigns have had a positive impact on their sales. We do know their sales are up, and we can see that we've had a big impact year over year on their digital efforts. So we can assume that we've had an impact on their in-store sales, but being able to plot it out on a graph and compare actual data points would give us a much stronger leg to stand on with saying that.
Cool. You mentioned there was a mobile partner that you were working with. What was that name?
Cito.
Cito. How do you spell that?
Cito. Sito.
Sito.
Another interesting display vendor for anyone who's interested in display advertising is Cluep, CLUEP. They do mobile proximity, but that's not their main avenue. They have an AI system that goes out and reads social media posts and targets advertising based on whatever you're posting online, whether it be words or images. It can read those and then deliver an ad to you based on your interests so that it's highly targeted.
What was the other one?
And we can also track when you go in store.
The other one was Cluep?
Cluep. Yep.
How do you spell that? CL?
UEP.
UEP.
Cool. Those are two of the best online stalkers for advertising.
Stalkers. I like stalk. No, I don't like stalkers. I like stalkers. No, I don't like stalkers.
Currently, I'm just tracking. I don't really have any voice in creating the marketing campaigns unless I know for sure that there's data saying that it's a bad idea. Then I don't hesitate to voice my opinion that it's a bad idea. And normally they listen to me because I have the data to back it up, and I try to be very careful with when I voice my opinion, so it's only good information.
The adage from back when I was teaching data analysis and display advertising and was very simple. Ye who rule the numbers rule the world. Lesson well learned, Kristen.
Yeah, a lot of our clients do not, when they come to us, they don't normally use data to influence their decisions. They use data to validate their decisions after the fact. So we are involved in trying to shift their mindset so that their campaigns are ingrained with data from the start of the campaign to the end of it.
Which
and that optimizations are made all the time based on data.
But you do something that's rather interesting that I've observed, and maybe my observation is wrong, but you seem to be able to strike a good balance between the numbers and business sense or intuition or whatever anybody wants to call it. Have you recognized that in yourself, and if so, how do you handle that?
Well, that's part of that is because I do not act like a traditional digital analyst. The majority of my coworkers in my department are at their desks all day, working on their dashboards, updating and creating insights based on data. For the majority of the time that I've worked at my new company, I have not had a dashboard to work with, so I've had to learn how to get the data from each of the different individual platforms. So I've had to sit with each of the different departments and spend a good amount of time with them and figure out how to get the data and what they're actually doing with setting up campaigns and trying to understand a bit more of what I'm seeing in their platforms, because it's not how I'm used to seeing data, because I'm in Facebook Business Manager and their reporting and their campaigns. I'm in their ads, looking at a whole bunch of different information, so I can just gather all the information that the client needs to see to take some of the stress off of them. And while I've seen Facebook, the back end of Facebook before when I was working with the nonprofit, I've never really been involved with the business manager aspect of it, because that's more all the paid advertising, and they have so many different options, so many different views you could do. They have different attributions, so you can look at a 28-day look-back window for view with a 1-day click, and that's their default. But they also have, you can look at 28-day click, 28-day view, 7-day click, 7-day view, and a 1-day click or a 1-day view. And you can do any combination of those, and that's different from every other platform. With DoubleClick, you can create the look back, but I believe 14 days is pretty standard, but also 30 days is another one people like to use, neither of which are on Facebook. So it makes a little disparity between tracking any sort of conversions, because you're always going to have a much larger number on Facebook unless you look at a 7-day or 1-day window, and no one really wants to make their conversion number smaller. And then AdWords has a 30-day look-back window for some of their conversions as well, and they just started also tracking store visits. So they also are monitoring when you walk into a store and when you walk out. It's a great amount of monitoring by everyone.
Well, when I was at Disney, we had tracker, shop tracker. So, for example, in the world of Disney, I could know how many people were in the store at any given time. I could know what doors they came in, which set of doors they came in, how much time they were spending, and what registers were the most productive at any given time. So we've been tracking people for a very, very long time, because this goes back to the 90s, and we're just talking about terrestrial tracking. So now we're just doing it on a new level with the phones and the internet. So yeah, it is creepy. I agree.
It's gotten highly accurate. They can tell when you walk into a specific store in the mall, even. So they can tell differences between stories too. So there's very little risk, very little chance of them not knowing that you've gone into a specific store.
So I'm not targeting you. I mean, I should just put up with the oddball looks when I walk in the store with my lead briefcase that I put my phone in and my tinfoil hat.
Yeah, because most people don't realize there's technology that can track them that well. Because you can even geofence a billboard these days, and that way they can track if your phone comes into proximity of that billboard, and then if you then go into the store for that, or depending on what it is that's on that billboard. Those aren't as popular because they are quite expensive. They run, I believe, upwards of $50,000 for a month for a billboard that has geofencing in some areas. Some areas are cheaper than that, but then they can be quite expensive.
That's pretty.
And that way you can mix traditional marketing with digital, and you can actually show how good of an impact that traditional aspect is having on your sales.
We're not too far away from some of those science fiction films like Judge Dredd and with Sylvester Stallone, and Minority Report with Tom Cruise and whatnot, with the billboards that customized to you as you walk up and greet you as you pass or drive by. This is some great stuff. We should talk more about this in terms of what future looks like and how this stuff can be used and leveraged down the road. But I want to be mindful of your time tonight because I know you just got home. What I would like to do is, if we've got any questions, Izzy or Maria, that you want to ask, we can turn it over to you all and ask away.
With the Adobe Analytics, is it Adobe Experience that you're talking about, or Adobe Analytics?
Adobe Analytics. While they do have a lot of marketing tools and different platforms you can use, if you get experience with Adobe Analytics, or even if you can just watch videos on how to use it, it really, really helps with getting a job with some of the bigger agencies, or even just with consulting, because there are some smaller businesses that have it. Like there is a couple of financial institutions on the West Coast that use Adobe Analytics, and they are constantly looking for people to help out and help them understand this tracking tool.
Well, this tonight has been extremely helpful. I appreciate you doing this. So this has been a lot of information that I needed to know.
Well, cool.
I'm glad I could help.
Very cool.
I'm always excited to bring more people into Adobe Analytics, because it means there's more people to help me with my work in the long run.
Cool beans. Maria's got a question for you.
Well, I think the best tip I could give is to always just be willing to talk to other departments in just other marketing departments, or even other departments, and understand what their pain points are. Because if you could help make their lives a little bit easier, additional skills that you didn't think you could use, but it'll help you out in the long run. Because I didn't think I would really need to know anything about SEO or anything really about social media marketing. And even though I do have a background in that, it's been really beneficial with my current job, being able to go and talk to those different departments and understanding their point of view, and it's made my insights a lot better.
Actually, Chris, I'm gonna jump on what she just said, because without knowing it, she's really talking about leadership and servant leadership, which is that whenever you can help other people out and have be looking out for their interests to try and help them and identify where their pain points are, where there's a gap in what they can do or what they can provide, and you can help them close that gap with a solution or even just an extra pair of hands. That's leadership, and down the road it pays huge dividends. So, Kristen, that was a great point, and I think a great piece of advice. Okay, so we're just about at 8. Any last words, anyone? Kristen, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Not really. It's been a long day, so there's probably things I should have said that I didn't think about. But
You did great. Awesome. Okay, so folks, we're gonna bring it to an end. I think I have one to-do left, which was for Kristen and I to brainstorm some of those HR forms and be able to put that out. And Izzy, thanks so much for coming. It was great getting to know you, and much success with your journey through the bachelor's program. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the master's program at some point. And Maria, it's always wonderful to talk to you. So everybody have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.